Welcome to another episode of Money You Should Ask. I'm your host, Bob Wheeler, and in this episode, we're going to explore, question, examine, converse, dig deep, expose, laugh, and cry about the money beliefs, money blocks, and life challenges of our next guest. Turn up the volume, listen, learn, and laugh. Good news, bad news. Bad news first. Growth comes from learning, which is a lifelong endeavor. Good news, growth comes from learning, which is a lifelong endeavor. At the Money Nerve Academy, we hold space to explore, navigate, discover, and heal your relationship with money. With our online course, Mastering the Emotions of Money, you can get in touch with your fears, blocks, and beliefs around money so that you can become more aware of your current financial story. By understanding why you do what you do with your money, you can create a different ending to your financial story than the one currently taking place. Check out themoneynerve.com and start mastering your emotions of money. Well, I am super excited today. We have an amazing guest, as we always do, but this one's extra amazing. Ira Meltzer has 36 years of experience and has been called Lender to the Stars since funding his first movie and TV star loans in 1986. His clients have set multi-million-dollar residential financing records across the U.S., and his team has funded more than $4 billion of luxury and ultra-luxury residential financing. His team learned exactly how to maximize wealth and benefits for 1 million plus homeowners through financing. In 2016, Ira reinvented the home financing business with $1 million plus, where clients get lower rates and a superior private bank lending experience. At $1 million plus, their goal is to help clients protect and add to their wealth through leveraging, preparation, strategy, and superior access. And one cool thing about $1 million plus is they never take a penny from the lenders. They work strictly for the clients. Ira, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Bob. It's great to be here and do this with you.
Well, I guess, my first question is, what's the difference between luxury and ultra luxury?
It's in the mind of the beholder, because if you live in a luxury home, you probably think it's ultra luxury, except when you pay your taxes, So what happens is in the actual financial markets, conforming loans go up to the mid $400,000 range, and they'll be going up in January to the $500,000 range. And then in certain populated areas, the conforming Fannie Freddie loans go up as high as a high balance in the $700,000 range. Over $700,000 today to about $1 million, maybe $2 million is luxury lending, luxury homes.
Okay.
Anything over $2 million is beyond the scope of even the jumbo lenders and becomes, a special private banking type of portfolio loan. And the homes that reflect that are basically homes over $3 million. I define that more specifically. My clients generally have a liquidity of $3 million minimum and $10 million net worth. Those are definitely ultra luxury clients, whether their homes aren't or not.
Well, in LA, it's hard to feel luxurious. Like I know my house is at 1.2, but it doesn't like it feels like a basic box. To me, it feels like in LA, 3 or 4 million just gets you a nice starter home.
And there's a funny story about that in New York, where I was the originator for Countrywide Mortgage, a private bank years ago, before the crash of 2008. The people of New York wanted to make sure they got more money out of the wealthy people, so they instituted a special mansion tax on any property over $1 million, only to later find out that every property in New York was now over $1 million. And they taxed themselves. They taxed everybody.
Oh, no.
So it's kind of funny about $1 million homes today.
Oh, that's funny. Did you always want to be a money guy? Like when you were a little kid, were you like, money's the game?
Well, I was a salesman. I was always a great salesman because I love people and I love trying to benefit people.
Yeah.
But I had a kind of wild childhood because I'm a child of the 60s, really. I grew up in college in the Bay Area with the Haight-Ashbury and Berkeley and all that. So I took another course, sort of like a rocket. I took a different course. But when I came back to Earth in 1980, I decided I needed to do something else and become a citizen. And that's when I got into And really, I got into residential real estate at first in 1980, before the financial part in 85, because I thought selling real estate was the closest thing to dealing pot.
With a little more payoff.
Yeah, I didn't have to worry about, flashing lights in the back of my car window. So it was a good thing that I made that choice. And then since then, in 85, I got into I found out that the difference between myself and others in the real estate industry was my knowledge in financing. Interest rates at one point were 19% back then.
Oh, wow.
So to be able to sell a house, you had to be able to manipulate money and financing and carry back financing with sellers and all kinds of tricks and gimmicks to make it work. And I was so good at that in 1985, Coldwell Banker asked me to become their mortgage guy for Los Angeles. So I moved to Los Angeles, and that's how I ended up in Southern California. I never thought I'd be in Southern California. I was way too good for that.
Way too good.
I'm legend in my own mind,
That's awesome. Well, now, do you also, one of the things when you're buying a house, at least for most people, they're worried about that interest deduction on their tax return. And if you're financing a $2-3 million house, you're only going to get a $750,000 tax deduction at this point. Do you have strategies for that, or is at that point it just doesn't matter?
Right. It's really interesting you bring that up, Bob, because when you get into the higher levels that I'm at, and I have clients, of course, that own homes, 20 million, 50 million. I have a client with a $90 million home. I do loans in a condo project in New York at 220 Central Park South, where Ken Griffith bought the most expensive home in America. It's a condo at roughly $250 million. And what happens is, as you get into the larger properties, I'm not giving CPA advice or legal advice, but let me tell you, there are LLCs that you can set up, and these are investments, and you can take a lot of tax benefits on these investments, because we're talking about investments now. We're not just talking about a $300,000 or $400,000, a $500,000 home to live in, where your main deduction is that owner-occupied tax deduction that's now limited to about $750, I believe.
Right, that's right.
The latest number. So, this is a whole different, as you know from your professional background, This is totally different.
Yeah, no, that's totally. I'm wondering if you got to work on the Aaron Spelling project. That was a really big house that he developed. I think his wife recently sold. That's like
I didn't do that, but I've done a lot of other real high-end ones. My favorite one right now is a $90 million home in Beverly Hills. And I've done a tremendous number in Beverly Hills. And my first celebrity, client back in 1986 was George C. Scott, who lived in Beverly Hills. And he was buying in Malibu, which is another very interesting real estate market. These are two of the top markets in the country,
Do you find there's any difference between celebrity clients and then just wealthy clients that just have a lot of money? The folks that are living in Malibu Colony, or hey, I'm a star. Do they come in with a different attitude than the other folks that are just, I'm old money, I don't need to impress anybody?
It's really funny you say that, because it's really about egos.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. Today, you could run a hedge fund and think you're a bigger celebrity than anyone else. Or you could become a celebrity and then become president. It becomes all these different things.
You got options.
But it comes down to the individual. You and I were talking about an individual before the show started who's a major celebrity, but one of the sweetest, nicest, generous human beings I've ever met. And then there's other people that are not. And it really isn't confined or limited. It's about the individual. And that's what makes this so interesting, is I deal with so many high-powered people on a daily basis. I mean, just today, I'm dealing with the owner of a baseball team. I'm dealing with a major celebrity in Hollywood. I'm dealing with people on the East Coast who are huge financial people. And each one of them is, we're really focused on how we save them the most money and get them the best terms. It's that in that area we all come together. Because even when you buy a $400,000 house, this is often the largest personal purchase in your life.
Right.
A home is the largest personal purchase in all of these people's lives. They may buy they might buy $1 billion businesses, but often on a personal level, they may have jets, they may have, exotic automobiles, but nothing is more expensive than the homes they're buying on a personal basis.
And how do you navigate? There's a lot of ego there. So I would imagine, and not intentional. It just comes with the territory. How do you navigate that? I mean, is that part of being good in sales and being able to relate to people and being able to just banter with folks?
I tell people when they ask me, because my average client is borrowing $8 million to finance a house, and I don't think there's anybody else in America that does what I do with that kind of average financing. And I say that 80% of what I do is talk people off the ledge. Right. Because no matter who you are and how powerful you are, you can either think that this is a given, that you're entitled to this, or you may feel gratitude and a different kind of, you go into it with a different attitude. But at every point during transactions, whether they're purchases or refinances, cash out, the construction, people have these moments where they're ready to go ballistic.
Yeah.
And things aren't working exactly right. And thank God, because I have 36 years of experience of knowing every option in how to get through a lot of different apparent speed bumps or barricades, as well as on a personal level. I think the value, if you call it being a salesman, is the self-deprecation, that I understand that it's not about me. It's about getting them to understand that this is going to work out and how we're going to make it work out, and getting back on track so they don't quit before the miracle. Right. Because every one of these loans in my book is a miracle.
Yeah.
When I can close a loan for $20 million one day for a second home in Aspen at 75% loan to value at 2%. Interest,
Wow.
These are amazing. I've been around a long time. These are amazing times right now. I call it, this is the time of Propertunity. It is so available to save money and build wealth through real estate right now, like no other time I have seen in my lifetime.
And I imagine you play a little bit of a therapist if you're talking people off the ledge. Because I know for myself, even when I'm doing a refinance or the couple properties that I've bought, even though I know I had the money in the bank, I had the credit score, they start looking at everything very critically, and then I start to have a meltdown, even though it always goes through. But there's it's my own story that I create this panic of like, oh my God, this will be they're going to find something, even though I didn't do anything.
This is the beauty of it. When I'm dealing with people like this, every single client, we're human beings. We all have issues that have happened in our lives, whether through divorce or credit or this or that. And I want to make sure I have it up front, so that what I do is make sure the lender understands right at the beginning what is the toughest part of the person that we're dealing with. So we dispose of that before we start anything else, and then it's smoother sailing. Whereas most mortgage people I've known try to put it under the rug, so to speak, right? I hope they don't find out, totally the wrong approach to life. And it's really based on the fact that, and this is the funny part of why I find myself different than a lot of mortgage people, and why I feel so blessed and grateful to be doing $8 million loans all day long, is because, like I've told all these private banks, including Angelo Mazzillo when he hired me at Countrywide, and Dick Rosenberg when he was CEO of Bank of America, because I have such a special clientele, it comes with it a special responsibility that I have. And just like the old Hebrew National commercial, I answer to a higher power than the bank. Okay? So as long as we understand that we're in line with honesty and being upfront, or we call it today transparent,
Yeah.
we're going to get along fine. And if the bank isn't being honest on their side,
Right.
we're going to have a problem as well. And normally banks go in and out of markets and aren't always honest about their priorities and their agenda. So I make sure that we're both right up there, honest at the beginning. And fortunately, over 36 years, I have connection and access to the top people at every single bank that I deal with for my clients, so that I'm dealing with the head of the private bank or a managing director of a bank, or, not just a loan officer. I mean, there are great loan officers working for some of the banks, but it's more important that my clients get into the banks at a much higher level.
Yeah.
And that our level of honesty is about relationship and not transaction. Now, when you do a loan on a conforming home, typically you're doing a transaction.
Right.
Because when I do a loan for my clients, when I advise them on their financing, we're building a relationship, and they basically are giving them the mortgage in order to have an asset side depository relationship with people they would love to have at that bank.
Yeah, you bring up a really important point that I've talked about before, and I feel it's true with my clients. I don't do tax returns. I do relationships. And it's about having the relationship, the trust, the integrity, and looking at things long term. And I think that's so important in sustainability if for a business, if you're not just looking for the quick buck or just making everything transactional. I know with the Comedy Store a few years ago, when things were tough, we weren't able to get a loan because just lending wasn't happening. Mitzi wasn't well. There wasn't money to be had. And I had a relationship with a small bank that ended up giving us the loan because of the relationship and because of who the Comedy Store was, not because we had money rolling out the doors.
Well, how big was that loan? Do you remember?
I think it was about $2 million.
And today for that same place, we just did an $8 million loan. So it's recorded, it's public information.
Yes, absolutely.
But, and so this is how times have changed, and we're no longer in the old handshake business that I loved years ago between a banker and a client. And in small town America with a James Stewart movie framing the whole picture, right? We're in a different world where most people are just a number. And that is really, it's a sad part of the progress that we have.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, everything is so. I mean, I think for a period of time, I enjoyed not having to talk to people and I could just click a button and all that. But I do actually miss the interaction because for me, it is the relationship. It's not the efficiency. Oh, he's going to talk to me for 3 minutes. That's a waste of my time. I just want to keep moving. And I think there is something in that, though, the developing a relationship.
Well, like you said, the original loans of $500,000 or maybe even as high as $750,000 in some areas are based on a formula, and they put in the data in a formula, and it pops out with yes or no for the money. When we're dealing with $8 million, $10 million, $20 million mortgages, even $3 million or $2 million. It's no longer in any formula. It's really customized and individualized. And I like that so much more as I've gone through the mortgage business. But there's been some incredibly funny experiences. Like I moved to the desert. I live in Rancho Mirage, and I'm able to serve the entire country, even before the pandemic. I could serve the entire country from my kitchen table. And I have one full-time assistant who's wonderful. And I did loans in a place called the Vintage Country Club, which is a beautiful, exclusive country club in Indian Wells, California. And one of the clients that I was asked to serve back then, we were going to do a $2 million loan, which was a big loan back then, years ago. And as I was introduced to him, he shook hands with me and he said, "Hi, I'm the most hated man in Canada." And I said, I've had a lot of introductions with people, but I've never met anyone who's the most hated man in Canada. I guess I'm going to find out why in the next sentence. And he said, I own the Edmonton Oilers, and I sold Wayne Gretzky to the Los Angeles. And he was the most hated man in Canada.
That is hilarious.
And I've met many men and many people that have incredible, unique world life experiences that I get, as we say, that I got to come in contact with. But I also, for free, love to help people who are buying property that are $500,000.
Yeah.
And it's more important in some ways that they are not taken advantage of, which many are, by having, entertainers doing TV commercials and all the rest, so they pad their profits at the expense of somebody buying. So those people I do for free. So anybody who wants to call me from your audience and talk about trying to work through some personal issue on a small loan, I'm happy to consult with them at no charge as my way of trying to give back, because I do answer to this higher power. And I'm so grateful for the living that I've been earning, that I do want to be able to use that experience and knowledge and access to help people that are starting out, or maybe not even starting out, but also in that arena, hardworking people who are looking to buy a home in that arena.
No, that's so nice to hear. I recently did a refinance, and I won't name the lending company, but they had said to me, hey, we'll do a refi for you because you're already with us. And so I said, great. And they put the numbers together, and I noticed that they were charging me $12,000 for closing costs. And so I called them up and I said, wait a minute, you're charging me $12,000 of closing costs. She goes, well, you're not going to be out of pocket. We're just going to add it to the loan.
Oh.
And I said, okay, that $12,000 now becomes probably $30,000.
That's right.
More.
That's right. That's right. And so just so your viewers know, as of this date, rates are always changing. But we're here on this beautiful Friday the 13th. I mean, the lucky day, right?
Yep.
As they should know that if you're doing a conforming loan today, the 0-point way is the way you generally want to go, with very few exceptions, and not have these costs. And today, the rate should be no more than 2 3/4 for a 30-year fix, and no more than 2.5% for a 15-year fix. Okay. And that doesn't matter whether it's purchase or refi.
Okay.
On those loans that you're talking about that are up to $500,000.
And that would be a primary residence only, right? Not rental
second
properties?
homes. No, rental properties would be more expensive, but you're right. That's primary and probably second homes.
And second homes. That's awesome. What is your favorite part? I mean, I'm sure that closing the deal is a good part of the deal, but what's your favorite part of the process when you're start to finish? You meet somebody, they tell you're the most hated person in the world, and you're off to the races.
What's so great about my 30 to 60 day process with people? We have very intense relationships for 30 to 60 days. Is one, when I get what I do that's different than a normal lender, I get a personal financial statement, which a conforming lender, doesn't even know what that means. Yeah. And I get that, and I get a narrative to know. Most of my people are relatively famous, so it's easy to Google them and really get their full narrative.
Right.
And what they're trying to accomplish in this transaction, and be able to take that and come back with the terms from a private bank, which I usually do, that are the lowest rates in America. And I'm able to share with them that I've gotten them the lowest rates in America. I'm closing a few loans this week for my clients at 1.875% interest and no points. That makes me happy. Then we go through the process. And the next huge milestone is getting approval, which in a sense, my clients are approved before we start the process. But we get the process and we get the approval. And with the approval, we get the word that we can go to loan docs. And we call that clear to close. And when I get the clear to close for somebody that we're ready to go to loan docs right now, that's a real exciting time for everybody involved. They know it's all done, and now they just have to go to escrow and sign the loan docs. They're going to be coming in the next few days. And then, of course, when it funds and closes, and a few days later is another high point. And the only thing that matches it all is the day after when they wire me my fee for having done it. So,
That's always nice. And do you have to go through, like, so I know when I went through my last refi, they were very confused that I went by the name Bob because the title was under the name Robert, right? And so I had to write this letter explaining that Bob is just a nickname for Robert. And I had to write all these crazy explanations for things that seem so basic. Do you have to go through that kind of stuff even on the bigger loans?
Well, some of the trivial type things like names, we usually have a form that just has all the different names. And when they sign their 130 pages of loan docs, one of the signatures is, yes, this is all me, but we don't make it a special, traumatic experience. It's part of the whole trauma of signing loan. Loan docs used to be about 5 pages. Today, I literally had loan docs with one loan was 150 pages. So that's the most onerous part of the whole process, is going through it. One of the first loans I did were for 2 district attorneys in Ventura County who were buying a house together. And they were lawyers, and not only that, district attorneys. So when I gave them their loan docs, they started to read every word of every sentence. I grabbed the docs from them and said, listen, I don't have time for this. You either got to trust and sign this and go home and read it on your own time. And then if you have a problem, come back. But it's a silly process. And talking to people, this is one of the keys that is so much fun to my business. I had a client who was probably one of the most famous actors in his day in 1980s. And he was trying to do something with purchasing a home in Malibu, a very expensive home, and not tell his wife about it. And he was going to leave her, and he didn't want the tabloids to know, and he didn't want her to know. And he was, don't you know who I am? Really one of the top, most famous people in Hollywood. And I had to go sit down, and he was a very volatile personality. And I had to sit down with him at the kitchen table. And I had the loan docs. It was several $1 million, which was a lot of money then. It's still a lot of money now, but it was really a lot of money. And he didn't need the loan, but his business manager wanted him to do it for tax reasons and keep his money in investments that are paying a lot more money. I had to sit down with him at his kitchen table, and I'd heard how he'd punched out a few people. Now, his accountant was too afraid to tell him you can't do this. His attorney was too afraid to tell him it's a community property state. You can't do this. And here I am with the loan docs. And by the way, I had the loan docs printed in both him and his wife's name already, right? And I sat down with him at his kitchen table, and he was about 3 feet away from me. Thank God he was on the wagon that day. Because if he wasn't, God only knows what would have happened. But he was on the wagon. He told me he was on the wagon. And we sat down, and I asked him, what are you trying to do? Because you don't want your wife to know, through this whole thing, you don't want your wife to know anything about this. And then he explained just what I told you.
Yeah.
And I had to say to him, and you will understand this perfectly, Bob. I said, one of the great things about my job is I know more about you, I told this famous actor, than anybody else on earth. Your accountant has part of the story. I have all that. Your lawyer has part of the story. I have all that. All your divorce papers, everything. Right? I got your credit reports. I know your whole history, right? I know more about you than any other single human being. And I got to tell you, you can't do what you think you want to do. But not only can't you do it, but I am in no place to judge. I'm only here to create a real simple service for you. I'm nobody. But I got to tell you, when you married this woman, she was your best friend. You loved her. She was your partner. And this is how you're going to treat her? I said, man to man, you cannot be doing this. This is wrong. And while I'm telling him this little, I answer to a higher power kind of stuff of what's right and wrong, his business manager, who's also very famous and in his 70s, was turning not red, but purple. Because he brought me into this transaction and he goes, "You can't talk to him like this. You can't talk to him." And I was afraid he was going to have a stroke, right? And then this very famous actor gets up and puts his face right in my face, about 3 inches away. I thought he was going to throw a punch. I didn't know. And he said, "Who the hell expects this from a banker?" And then he sat back down and said he hadn't been able to sleep in weeks. He knew that something was wrong and nobody would tell him it was wrong. He went and had the business manager now by this time, the business manager's going, "I don't believe it. I don't believe it." And he's going, "Give me the phone." And he calls his famous wife, who's also a movie star, and starts to tell her the truth, that what he was going to do, buy the house, leave her, and he's really sorry, and he wants to try one more time to reconcile. Wow. And that touched my heart. I mean, I was almost crying, right? And then I started to say something, and he said, "Shut the F up." I've had as much sincerity as I can take for one day. And we became very good friends after that. Of course, we closed the loan. But, I'm there to do retail, private mortgage banking, but I'm really there for something else. We're all here in life for a reason and reasons. And we're put in the positions and relationships for a reason if we're willing to look at it with a higher consciousness about what we're doing. So when you asked me at the beginning, did I ever want to dream of being in the mortgage business or something? Of course, I never would think of that. I've always dreamt of money, of course. Women and money, how can I not, right? And I have a beautiful wife whose picture is behind me, and I have the most highest level career that I could have ever dreamed of. But it's only because I'm doing the footwork. I'm no big shot. I'm no big star. But what I'm doing is able to provide a service that is so unique, it seems, because we're surrounded by people who would like to live in fantasy and delusion and demoralization and all the rest. And I'm not wired that way.
Yeah.
I'm wired that somehow I'm supposed to be of service, just like you are. You're providing this great service, Bob, of talking about money and educating people more about their money issues. And it's all just a great opportunity, or propertunity, as I say, for us to keep moving forward and helping people become wealthy. Because residential real estate is a great part of the road to wealth. And to gain wealth, retain wealth, grow wealth, and pass it on to your next generations, your heirs. This is a beautiful thing about under all is the land that we're living in this great country that we live in.
No, that's awesome. And now I know you've thought about money, and I know that one of your mantras or your mottos is "cash is king," which I think is really true today, even more so than ever. That's what I've been saying to a lot of my clients right now with all this uncertainty. Cash is king. Like, hold on to the cash, be able to work from cash. How did you come to that realization, and how does that impact you? Like, how does that influence you? Cash is king.
It's a funny story because I don't know. I come from very humble beginnings. I grew up in a bunk bed in a kitchen in Brooklyn, New York. That's where I was born.
Wow.
And my parents were hardworking people and taught me the value of education. But in my careers, I've had, I've grown a lot of money and I've lost a lot of money, and I've spent money foolishly and invested money foolishly. Only in retrospect do I say foolishly.
Right.
With hindsight of after the crash, you get to see, I should have done that one.
Bad idea.
And each time I go back and say, God, can we do this again? I promise this time it'll be different. But it's always about, my father used to say, rich or poor, it's good to have money.
Right. That's right.
So really what it is part of our freedom. Part of our ability to have choices is to really be, and so I also grew up with relatives. I have one uncle that had a candy store in Brooklyn and lived above the candy store. So often we find that and he did okay, and his kids all went to college, first generation, and all that stuff. But we find a lot of people think having luxury goods that depreciate in value, that for me which is mostly meaningless, is running out and spending money to be showing off or to, these kinds of things is a big mistake, and everyone has their own level of risk and savings and how to do it, so each of us has to find a happy medium that allows us to enjoy life, to go out to dinner, to do the things we like to do, but also know that money can have an alternative use that will sustain you, will help you in later years. So you need both a short-term, and what's missing in a lot of people is long-term consequence, to see the long-term consequence of your action and your choices. And that's why it's always fun to be able to, look at to look at a bank account, investment accounts, my value of my homes, and say, this is good. I feel more secure. Right. I feel better about where I'm at. And not just for me, but for my wife, for my family. Yeah. That I have that sense of responsibility that is not a burden. It's a gift. Right. To have responsibility is a gift. And too many people don't want to be irresponsible. I mean, we see it with this pandemic. The level of irresponsibility and lack of seeing the consequence of people's actions is astounding to me. My clients know how to deal with money. And that's what makes it so much fun, is they at least get the value of money to do all kinds of things. And as I say, some are extremely generous and philanthropic. I've been on the board of the Children's Museum here in Rancho Mirage with Walter Annenberg and Gerald Ford and people from other walks of life who were incredibly generous, people who create for me the role models, and people in the entertainment industry. Some of the most generous people there are in professional sports. Some of the most generous people there are in these endeavors. And I get to interact with them and learn from them.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you talk about with people not looking at consequence, I think culturally, at least for the last couple decades, it's mostly about instant gratification and what can I get? And I think the majority of citizens aren't looking ahead or planning for their future or have put money aside because I got to have this today, instead of thinking about, this is how it's going to play out in the long run.
I think the biggest generation of instant gratitude I saw was in like the 80s. Yeah. The 1980s personified that, they call it the cocaine generation. It was just immediate party pleasure. And young people are always going to be doing some, partying, even in this pandemic. That urge to get out and dance, is so much there. But what's happened is I've watched a lot more fear. There is a level of fear in the universe here that I hadn't seen before, and I've seen it personified in the last 5 years, let's say, and certainly aggravated from what's coming from government. That is a fear-based message that pushes people often into just being even more selfish and self-centered, which at the core is fear. Rather than instant gratification. It somehow sometimes gets displayed that way. Right. But it's really going down to the causes and conditions. And that's why I prefer dealing with people with money, because in this endeavor, because I can benefit them and they have an understanding of the value of it, and the use of it, the proper use, and their word is good. I don't care what political spectrum you're from, right wing, left wing. People I deal with who have doing these things are people of their word. Yeah. And I love dealing with people when they say something, it has meaning, and I could count on it. And that's a truly great part of my job, my business.
No, that's awesome. And I think integrity and knowing that there's a a higher purpose and a,
Right.
it's important. What would you say? I know we're getting close to the end here. What would you say are a couple of strategies for people out there that want to have more wealth, that want to make a shift? Just based on all that and your experiences, what would you say are a couple strategies that people could do practically to start to shift that?
Right. It really depends on where you are in your age and career and your savings and your money and your family. But typically, to give a general answer, buying a home instead of renting is usually the place to start, because that then gives you the basis of not only a more comfortable and secure place to be living day to day and taking care of your family, but it allows you, especially in an interest rate that's in the 2% environment, to grow wealth, because homes are going to go up more than 2% compounded, while you're paying simple interest in the 2% range, which is a whole other discussion. But that's where big part of that value comes in, that you don't have to worry about losing your money. And as long as you're not paying much more or any more than rent, you're never going to be in a bad condition owning a home. And then that home, as you build equity, if nothing else is going on with you, that home can become the source of your down payments or investment money, or however you choose to further building wealth. And that is such a personal issue of how to build wealth once you own a home, to build more wealth and own more real estate, if that's what you're meant to. Now, we also live in a time where Airbnb and these other kinds of disruptors have changed the rental income of property, where before it might have been, let's say you'd make $2,000 a month on a real estate. Now you might be able to make, $8,000 more on that same piece of property by renting it out on a shorter term, as long as it's compatible and you have the right property and the right willing to do the work that requires, etc. And you can build up. I know people have built up a number of properties quickly because of that, because then they take that money and buy more property and keep repeating that. So it really is getting a planning and a strategy and goals and having more looking into the future of where you want to be with this situation if you want to build wealth. And I think, it's a good, and still enjoy life. I'm a big proponent of really having fun each day and making every day delightful.
So, final question, Ira. What do you want your legacy, your impact, your footprint to be?
Wow. Is that a heavy question? Well, we were just talking about banking here.
I know, but we're not, because you've got integrity and you've got a heart and you care, and that's important.
Thank you, Bob. Like all adjusted human beings, it's all about love. And hopefully I've given people a lot of love in my life. And hopefully I'm still shooting for 120, years. I mean, the Bible said that,
Yeah.
So, but hopefully I impart a lot of love and care and kindness to people, because those are the things that are really important in this life. And as far as what I'm doing now, I just want to be able to continue benefiting other people, serving other people, and see more and more what the next thing is around the next corner of what we do and where it goes. And that has been so interesting over these 36 years from where I started from. And certainly over a lifetime in a bunk bed in a kitchen in Brooklyn from where I started from. And I start every day thanking God, and I end every day thanking God. And that's the best I can do.
I think that's awesome. And it's interesting. This morning, I have a stack of money and empowerment cards, and I pull out a card and sort of see what the inspiration. And today, the money card said, "It's all about love." Wow. So I think it's
just remember on the back of the bill it says, "In God we trust."
That's right.
That's why one of the reasons cash is king.
Cash is king. That is true. That is true. Well, Ira, this has been so awesome. Where can people find you on social media, websites, all that good stuff?
The simplest thing is spelled out. $1million plus.com is the website. And they can find me at $1million plus@gmail.com. But of course, the website has my phone number and all this other stuff.
All that good stuff. And I hope people...
Pleasure to be with you, Bob.
No, it's been awesome. I will make sure we post all that information. I just want to share to our listeners, don't forget to share the love. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Search for Money You Should Ask, all one word. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And if you prefer to watch our episodes, head over to the YouTube and subscribe to our channel. Ira, thank you so much. It's so been a pleasure.
Thank you, and I hope I can help your listeners with any questions and any help I can give them. Thank you.
Absolutely.